So in Tacoma, those are once a month, and then they do the M&M with the CAF conference, which is kind of odd. But they never invited you guys to that. It was kind of an extra optional thing, but they're pretty interesting. Put that in your mind for your future careers when you're out in the field and you are working in a hospital and you see CAF conference, go to it. Now that's good for echo as well, and vascular. If you're working in a hospital, they'll show nuke med images, MR images, path visible light images of like pathology slices of tumors or whatever they cut out of somebody, and then they'll show cath images with coronary angios, and they'll show echoes. So they use all the modalities to tell the story about their patient. So it's not just for cath lab people. So echo and vascular, if you ever get a chance to go see one, you should. They're pretty interesting. Enough about that. That was our, well, I'll just pull it up the calendar and we'll use the calendar for a source of discussion right here. So this is looking at our daily activity in this class, and that's what I'm talking about. And can you all see my screen? I think you can. I can see it here. Oops, that's not the right one. Page 1 of 3, page 2. There we are. Yeah, that went way back or something. Compatibility report. What? I guess we want page 2. This says 2021. See that? Spring 2021. I guess I had an Excel spreadsheet with 3 layers and I didn't notice that. I should have deleted those other 2. But Tuesday we'll talk in this class. This is the red class. Wednesday was that CAF conference I just talked to you about. It's on hold for now. I expect they'll probably get those going and whenever we can all meet in large groups and when we can travel. We can get back to life as normal. I'll put my mask on, but sometimes I need it off to feel like I'm communicating more clearly. Maybe before your program careers are over at the end, maybe in the fall, you'll be able to go back to CAF conferences or next year. So anyway, we'll test on Thursdays. The weeks that we have a content discussion on Tuesday, we'll test Thursday. And that'll be an online test. You were used to doing those. I was doing those with you before, so same format. You don't need to come in for that. You can do that from home. I don't think I'm going to leave them here. I'm going to throw this at you guys. I was having them stay open from 6 a.m. till midnight, but then I can never really do anything with the test until the next day. And you guys probably want to know how you did. You want to know my adjudication of the exam. I review it, and maybe I give a curve. Maybe there's some questions I have to, for essay, I have to read them and then I score them. So I don't want to go till midnight anymore because I'd like to get you guys the exams results the same day. So maybe 6 a.m. until noon. And then the afternoon I can get in there and do something. Does that work for you guys? I know it works for my invasive guys because
Darren, we have class. Echo has class that day until 2:30, I believe. So it would probably.
Do you have it at 6? Do you have it in the morning? Do you have it at like 7:30 in the morning?
No.
No, I don't think so. So you could take your test in the morning, and this window's open in this class 7:30, 8:30 to 9:30. That's enough time to take the test.
Hey, so Darren, I'm just thinking.
I don't think we'll be leaving it open till midnight.
Hey, Darren.
Go ahead.
Tacoma
I hear you.
Lab at 7:30, and then we have class up until 2.
So that doesn't work for you guys. That's legit. So Scott's got you doing lab on Thursdays. Okay. Well, what if I make it till like, now, see, that kind of screws it up because I don't really want to have to come in after 2, 4. Maybe I leave it open till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Or maybe 6, but then you know what? I'll think about it.
6 o'clock is good. Leaving it open until 6, I should be good.
Hopefully, but then you can say, well, I got to drive home from my class in Seattle, and it takes me 2 hours to get through traffic to get home. I mean, that's legit also. So maybe we just won't be knowing our results until like later. But we'll think about it. I think I can figure something out. But that's the thing. I just wanted to get the test results up the same day because people want to know. All right, that's enough about that. Let's let's see, we'll go back to modules. Oh, I put a request in, the recordings for this class were no longer supported because it was an Adobe format. Modules. These guys don't work. I was able to make them work last quarter with something we were doing with the lab, the hemo lab, but I'm thinking about another alternative, and I put a request into the IT guys, and you would be going into Panopto recordings, and I'm asking them to make a previous year's class available. I'll pull that up and I'll show you how that looks. I sent you an announcement to that effect yesterday saying that there was a disable issue. So this says spring of 21. There's no Panoptos in there. We're going to do it like this. I think I picked year 2019 because 2020 was a COVID year. That was a weird year for us. So it's going to be like this class. You should, whoops, that's 256. That's to say. It'll be a class that'll pop up and it'll say, yeah, that helps. It'll be this class. So you'll pull this one up. Now I can pull it up because I can see like my 500 Panoptos or ever, the last 10 years of them. But you guys don't get access to them. Maybe you get last year's and this year's, but that's 2 years back. So I've asked them to make available this to all of you. And basically what I'll do when that happens, I'll kind of tell you, okay, this one is going to be here 16 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. There's an hour. That's a real, this was like some kind of get things started class. And then that's a real class. There's an hour. That's some content. And I'll kind of look at these and I'll say, all right, this is chapter blank for this week and start on, see, it's an hour and one, but I usually kind of horse around and we kind of yak like we're doing now for 5 minutes. So I'll say like start at 8 minutes and 30 seconds. You just cut right to the content, unless you want the banter. No, you don't. Not if it wasn't your banter. It's not relevant to you. It's a previous year's banter, not relevant. So anyway, I'll do that. I think he's going to do it. He's going to make access. But these, these 47, there's a real class. There's a real one. There's one. 48 seconds. That's some blip. There's a real one. Oh, there's Wes Todd. He was teaching that day. At any rate, that's what we'll do. So watch for that. I put it in the request yesterday, which was a holiday or Sunday, and I didn't get a chance to read all my emails this morning. So watch for that. Otherwise, I have done something with this Zoom class. I set it to record automatically to the cloud. Has any of you guys ever had another faculty record them to the cloud? And then the question is, how do you find them? Because I haven't. And where are they? They would upload into your modules automatically? I don't know either. This is the first time I did it. But this is being recorded to the cloud, and we just have to find it. That's the point. So this is the live one, but that's also previous year one, so you could watch it in advance. That's the idea. Watch the video in advance so you come in here kind of prepped. Okay. Enough about that. We'll have some fun with this class. This one is, we'll look at this. This is this Word document. This is the schedule for our class. We've got a special treat coming up in 2 weeks. This class teaches you about how the body works, cardiovascular, not really anatomy, but physiology. How does all the heart and vessels work together? This class will talk about hemodynamics and blood flow, which kind of ties into the class we just finished last quarter. Electrophysiology will start getting into how does the electrical signal get from one cell to another, and what are some of the ions that are important, like sodium, calcium, and potassium. And then we'll look a little bit about how do we manipulate that to stop arrhythmias. Then there's this one called the pump, and this one is a 2-hour lecture. So that's a one-time, one-off. I already cleared it with Rachel and Scott Cutler with an email like 3 weeks ago. I didn't hear any negative feedback from them. So this day is a 2-hour lecture starting at 7:30 I asked Dr. Limegrubber, he's been doing this for the 28 years I've been here. And he said, this is the last one. I said, yes, this is the last one. I won't ask you again. And he goes, okay. He loves doing it. But he was like, he's retired about 5 years ago. I said, hey, can you do another one? All right, I'll do it. And then I said, I got one more request. I'm retiring. You're retired. Can you do one more? He goes, I'll do one more. So this is like what do you call it, the very last? Is that the encore? What do you call the last performance, like in a theater, in a set of plays? The very last one.
The finale. This
is the finale. Yes, this is the finale. But he really has a passion for cardiology. He was trained in Zurich, Switzerland, and he trained with some of the pioneers in cardiology back in the 80s. In fact, the guy that started angioplasty, used to be the only way to open a coronary artery was open heart surgery with veins from your leg. This guy was trained under the guy that made these little balloons in his kitchen in Zurich at night, sterilized them in gas, and then put them in patients and open the artery with a balloon, which is what we do now, stents and balloons. So he trained with a guy that figured that out. It's pretty cool. And so he's really good at stuff. He learned from a master. He's going to teach you the pump. So what does the pump mean? Well, it's the heart. But he's going to get down into like how end diastolic volume changes, what the starting law, what it's really doing when it stretches the heart, and what happens when your systolic blood pressure is too high. How does that really push back on the heart and stop it from being able to do its work? He'll teach you how does digitalis really work. The sodium potassium pump gets poisoned and there's more calcium floating around. Some really cool stuff. And he has a passion for that. So he'll talk for 2 hours. So that day you got to get up a little bit early, but it's worth it. It's the best one of the whole. It might be your best class the whole quarter. That's how good he is. He's better than me. I mean, it's like Baylor last night. They were a little bit better than Gonzaga. Like a lot better. So he's like a lot better than me. I wasn't trained by a master in Zurich. At any rate, that's that class. So don't miss that one. That's a good one. Regulation of the heartbeat. So that's pretty cool. I teach that one. That was my favorite. That's my favorite unit in this whole class. There's like 12 things in your body that are wired in through wiring, sympathetic, parasympathetic, or chemicals, hormones, or sugars that lets your body know that it needs to increase or decrease its heart rate, increase or decrease its force of contraction to meet the needs of your external demands. So it's like all the wiring connections to your heart that makes it change its pace and force, which is pretty cool. That's that chapter, regulation of the heartbeat. I like that one. The next one is called arterial system, and in that one, we learn about compliance and storage of energy in the vessels during systole. And then we get into microcirculation and lymphatics, which is looking at some cool things I didn't know about the lymphatic system. Maybe I learned it 30 years ago, 40 years ago when I was in college, but I didn't remember it. But like every day, all of your vascular volume escapes your vascular system through pores. And then the lymphatic system collects it and pulls it up and brings it back into your thoracic duct. That's kind of cool. What kind of things can make your lymphatic system work more thoroughly or fail? We talk about things like plasma proteins and albumin. When people get in motor vehicle accidents or get burned, their bodies become more porous. They start leaking fluid. So we can manipulate your ability to retain fluid by adding plasma proteins. We'll kind of get into that kind of stuff. Some pretty cool things. Peripheral vasculature. The vascular texts are going to like this one. That's basically how does the body distribute blood flow to everywhere in your body. But there's really not enough to talk about for an hour with that. So I added something to the book, which is good. I added an anatomy map of the body, like head to toe, and we name the great vessels. We do all the legs, we do the arms, we do the great vessels of the aorta, and I've skipped the abdomen. It's important, but I didn't do those. So you get to learn all, like you'd be able to name the blood, every artery you go from the aorta down to your toe. And so for you vascular guys, you're already learning that. So it's like, oh yeah, we already learned that in another class. That's easy. So we'll be doing that. Cardiac output is basically how does your body manage cardiac output. It's kind of tied in a little bit like this regulation of heartbeat. How does the body manage variations in flow needs? Coronaries is the coronary arteries and the coronary veins. And how does your body regulate flow specifically to different walls of your heart? What are the metabolites, nitric oxide, oxygen? What does CO2 do to the flow or the vessel diameters? And so we'll get into that. And then the last one, which is on the 1st of June, is special circulations. And that's basically like your kidney has two arterioles before and after the glomerulus, and that's the only place in the body where you have two arterioles. Usually there's one arteriole before a capillary to check flow. This one allows you to manage your urine output. Talk about the circle of Willis in the brain, which is a built-in collateral circulation, and other variations, how the lung distributes blood flow based on oxygen. And then we get into, I added something to that. I had a talk that I was shared with by another faculty member from another college of things that happen in the animal kingdom, like what's special about the heart of a sea turtle? Okay, well, you wouldn't think, well, I didn't think there was anything different between a sea turtle's heart and my heart. Well, there is. They have two aortas, one for when they're above water and one for when they're below water. And then speaking of water, how does the heart of a fish work? They have a three-chambered heart. It's kind of funky. So they don't have a systemic ventricle. So like I said, whoa, that's weird. All they have is a venous ventricle, so that's weird. It only goes through their gills, and then there's no like left ventricle in the aorta for the fish. So there's some weird stuff, and we'll get into that. That's kind of a little nugget at the end. That's a treat at the end of the class. All right, questions, comments about that? These are the dates of the lectures. So every Thursday after these dates would be a test day. And I think we pretty much chunk along, pretty much flowing pretty much every week. I don't see any skips. Do you guys? I don't think so. Okay. Now, what are the tools? Go ahead.
Darren, so are we having a test this week?
That's correct. Thursday. So here's the syllabus. If you're going to use kind of an flow of an outline, there's the units. This is the, Where's the rest of my syllabus? Oh, I guess I got rid of, okay, I know where I put it. Let's see. Lecture outline. This is a flow. If you want to like use this to supplement your notes, these are the flow. I guess it takes a second to load up. 49. This is a bullet point outline of all the topics that will be discussed in this class as drawn from the textbook. Now, there's different versions.
You keep scrolling down.
There's different versions of the text. What did you guys buy this year? I have the 10th on my desk. I have to buy it. This company likes to do something where they sell it like it's brand new and improved, just like, so you're on the 11th, for God's sakes. I'm behind again. That's all right. This company likes to rebrand their book about every 2 years and say it's new. Well, they change about 2 pictures and maybe 150 words, and they call it new. And then it's like, so it's not a used book, it's a new book, so it gets a bigger price. If you bought the new one, that's great. If you can find a used one, that's okay before you open it. But having the newest one is the best. I think you might want the book in this class. The reading is good. I read it myself. But this is an outline of the text. And there was earlier versions where the chapters were split a little bit differently, and that's how this is set up. And I want to show this to you right now. If you look at your book, chapter 1 will talk about the circuitry, and then it gets into like lymphocytes and all that, and white blood cells. We don't get into that. I'm not getting into that. But this chapter 2 is electrophysiology in everybody's book. That's our next unit. But after version 9, they split the electrophysiology into 2 parts. So This chapter 2 is about electrophysiology, which gets into the waves like I was telling you about inside the heart, sodium, potassium, calcium. And then it gets into, here we go. Then it gets into the conduction system and then the EKG review. Okay, EKG review, here we go, rhythms, all the different rhythms. Now, that's the older version before version 8. Now, version 9 and after, it splits this EKG stuff into a chapter 3. So, don't freak out. In your books that you have now, anything after chapter 2, they're gonna be one chapter higher than what I might be talking about, but the content will be correct. So just stay with me on the content, but your chapter number is going to slide up one because they split this EP into 2. Make sense? You know, oh, well, don't get all worried about what number it is. Look at the content. Stay with me on the content. That's it. That's the message. Okay. So, you know what? This is a chance next week for you guys to prove to me and for you guys to review your EKG. Next week, what I'll be doing in my class with you guys is getting into arrhythmias. I'm going to show you a bunch of arrhythmias, say, hey, you know, let's do a rhythm review, and I'll give you some rhythms on the test. So you can tell me the difference between AFib and sinus and VTAC and VFib and, you know, first and second, third degree heart block, those kind of things. So just a heads up, be thinking of, I always want to put EKGs in front of you guys every quarter because that's kind of a foundation for our field. If you want to get a graduation stamp that says you graduated from my program, you're going to know how to read an EKG. And that's something that's just, it has to be foundational knowledge. You also need to know how to read a Wiggers diagram if you want to be a graduate from my school. Okay. All right. So we'll do an EKG review next week. So anyway, this is an outline that you might like, hey, that's a good flow for the discussion. I don't have to write everything down. I can just use this as a base. Okay. It's also, you could say, wow, you know, that's a flow of what we learned about, and it could be not really a study guide, but it's a flow of content back to modules. Speaking of study guides, I put old quizzes in your syllabus, I think. Yeah, they should be at the bottom of the syllabus. But these are old quizzes from old classes, and they go back. One thing about anatomy and physiology, it doesn't really change much in 100 years. Like the anatomy that humans had 2,000 years ago is what we have today. There's some small amount of evolution. I imagine people's thumbs will get stronger, but maybe, you know, depending on how you use your smartphone. Your eyes, you're going to start getting, it's true, this is one thing that's happened to us. We're short-sighted because we're living in a short-faced world when we're used to being out in the world hunting and looking far for our food. Now we are all doing everything face up. And it's changed us. Our eyes aren't as good as they used to be, I think. I was watching some show about that. Here's old quizzes. And these would be some questions. Didn't I give you the answers? I think I did at the bottom. Let's scroll down here, see if I got the answers down here. I have the answers. I have those. I thought I would have put those. Let's just let it load up. It's a little slow. Come on now. Oh, I should have waited. It was just about to come up. Well, that doesn't give you the answers. So you might want the answers. Let's see. Tori, do you mind sending me an email? And it says, post answers to quiz, please. And then I can just make sure I scan it and post that document for you all. Here's something kind of interesting. Now, Todd software does relate to this chapter, or to this class. And you can look at, these are the units that Todd, if you want to say, hey, I think I want to study that a little bit more, these are the Todd units that would tie in with all the chapters. Okay? So there you go. That's a little extra something. I used to make them required for the class, that you'd have to do these units with each class, but I don't do it anymore. So here's just, if you want a little bit more.
Darren, I have a question.
Go right ahead.
For the quiz coming up this Thursday, the old quizzes would be probably the best study guide to use?
Yeah, they're good. Reviewing what I say today is more important.
Okay.
Darren, I
And
had a
then
question.
the old quizzes are, if you like that, looking at the lecture outline, if you can make comments based on that stuff, that's good.
Hey, Darren, I had a question.
Sure.
That last Todd software that you were talking about, where would we go to review those? I'm not quite sure I understand that.
That's the stuff that you did for the labs on HemoLab last quarter. You did the hemodynamics 1 through 5 for your labs 1 through 5.
Oh, you're just so those numbers were referring to just the labs that we did.
Those were referring, we did all of them out of one chapter last quarter. We did like E1 through E5, I think it was. I think is what we were doing.
Oh, so
1
we
through
still
5.
have access to the Todd software.
Sure. It's in our computer lab downstairs, and it's in the invasive lab, 4 computers upstairs. And for Tacoma, it's in your 3 or 4 computers that you have in your study area. But these are the different chapters for the Todd that would be relating to these units. Like this one is E, that's E is hemodynamics. We stopped at 5. Number 6 goes into cardiac output, and there it is. As well as 7, which I think goes into vascular resistance. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. You're welcome. So that's kind of it. As we flow, these videos won't probably be coming online, but we should be able to have the cloud access to these Zoom recordings and then very likely get Panoptos from 2019 coming. Okay? So let's get started. This is the presentation right here. I guess I'll pull it up. And I'll pull it up from this format. Actually, I can probably, no, I'll do it like that. I think it's doing it. I think it is. And then for my invasive students, I'll have a class today with you guys from 12:30 to 2, and it's live. So if you guys are wanting to be at home, I guess you can be at home, but I would encourage you to come in for a live class for a little bit more like interaction. And then on Mondays, we're going to have lab, and that is definitely live, starting next Monday. I think it's 9:30 to 11:30 for the invasives. So I will be here this quarter. If you want to know when I'm going to be around, I'll be here on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the Mondays I teach labs. That's when I'll be on campus. Okay. Well, what is going on there? Let's see. Okay, didn't do it. 2 clicks. I don't want that. Let's see what happens here. Okay, that's the one, yeah. So there are 39 slides and we have 25 minutes. Can we do it? We better get started. This one, it took a little time to get the class going. All right, so this is chapters 1 and 5 in this version, but it's going to be 1 and 6 in your book because 2 and 3 were split. See?
Hey, Darren.
So anything after, yes.
Would you be able to record this as well?
It is being recorded to the cloud.
All right, cool, thanks.
And yeah, so, okay, so there's some formulas that we can relate to the flow of hemodynamics. And I'm not going to get into, this is not physics flow class, physics math class, but these formulas relate to the flow through our body. And so the Q is flow, and it's related to the relationship between the velocity and the cross-sectional area of the blood. Basically, these times are volume, and that's volume. And so we'll look at some pictures. We'll talk about kinetic energy and potential energy. Remember that talk we had about stenosis last quarter where we said the body turns pressure as potential energy out into flow, but if there's stenosis, it becomes turbulent, and that's a lot of kinetic energy. We'll kind of talk a little bit about that. Fuseliers law, which has to do, how did Jabando say? How would you guys learn? I've heard three ways of saying this. Fussois, Fuseliers, and one I can't remember.
Croisier.
Poissier, there's number 3 then. So I don't know. I had a student once that had a French major. She had a bachelor's degree with a French major, and so I was like, okay, I believe what you say. But then I don't remember which one she said. So Pousseliers, Poussois, Pousset. He's a French dude. He's a physiologist. Flow is equal to pi, which is a round pipe, directly related to the pressure gradient from the beginning to the end of the pipe, like the aorta to the RA on the systemic, or the PA to the LA on the pulmonic, and then the radius to the fourth, which is how your body controls flow, because this is a powerful mathematical compounding number. 8 is an empiric constant to make it work. Viscosity slows. So anything up here makes your blood flow faster, or more flow, not faster, but more volume. Down here reduces it. So viscosity slows it down, and longer arteries slow it down. Ohm's law has to do with resistance, and we'll talk about that on parallel and series vessels. Then laminar and turbulent flow, there's something called Reynolds number. If the number exceeds 2000, the flow goes from laminar to turbulent. And so turbulent blood flow is not good for us. And then there's a little section where it gets into some strange things about blood flow, like how the viscosity can cause dissections. If there's high velocity, it can cause tearing off the intima. And there's something called shear thinning. Has anybody figured that one out yet? That's the one I always have to, like, when I'm reviewing this stuff every quarter, it's like, yeah. Oh, that's shear thinning. Let's see. Let's look at that again. It's something weird that happens in your body where when the blood flows through the capillaries, the red blood cells go faster. And then it makes the relative viscosity lower. So it's kind of like it changes the mojo of the blood in the capillaries. So that's what shear thinning is about.
Hey, Darren.
Oh, go ahead.
This is a little off topic, but are we meeting on Thursdays, or are we just taking a test?
No, we're going to take the test online. So this is the only live class for this course.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So this class, basically we meet 1 hour and then we do the test, and it's a 4-credit class. So actually on this one, you get a lot more credit than hours with me. Where on remember that class we had in the first quarter, it was like pharmacology, where we kind of really worked hard for an hour, and all we got was 1 credit. Well, this one you get 4 credits for your hard work. So I should have made myself, I get paid more when I teach more credits. I screwed up. I should have made those fall classes at least 2 credits, don't you think? For the amount of work that you did and how hard we taught. I thought so. But this one you're going to get some GPA on this one. You get some credits on your transcript. Towards that 105, which is your degree number, like 105, 107 credits, that's your AAS degree for these programs. So this is 4 of them.
Darren, at the end of the quarter last year, you talked about doing a review for the tests on Thursdays, but you're not going to do that?
Today's the review for the test. Thursday's the test.
Okay.
Every day, what I can do with you guys is I could start the next Tuesday looking at the old test if you want, because I used to give tests live, and then I would always review them right after the test. That might be what I was talking about, reviewing the test right after it. But we don't doing that when it's online, because we don't want to do a Zoom at 6:30 p.m. or something. I don't.
I think we're just concerned that we only have 1 hour.
That's right. That's how this one's going to roll. So today is working all the kinks out. So let's get to some content. Now we're hopefully done with work. But if you have more questions, this is a good day to ask, because we're all trying to figure out who, what, where, when, how, and why we're doing. What do we got to do? What's our job this quarter? So that's what we're working on today. This is the vessel lining of an artery, and there's the same thing in a vein. Veins have valves. Some veins, not all veins. Veins have valves, typically the ones that are gravity dependent, like the leg veins and your arm veins. And that helps blood come up against, and that's one of the things we'll talk about in this class, blood coming up against gravity. But look here, if I take my hand and I slide down the veins, at some point there's going to be a big bulge, like a little dam. That's where one of the valves is. And blood goes up past that valve, and as I contract my muscles, it squeezes the vein and moves it up. And that's part of how blood gets back. But I've got a valve right here. There's a valve. There's a little, you see it all, you feel it all pressurized and downstream, it's low pressure. If you keep doing that, you're going to blow your valve. So, you know, I do that once a year, so I don't think I ruined my valve. But it puts a lot of pressure on them when you pressurize them like that. People that stand for a living, they get the big venous swelling, varicose veins, varicosities, vein, you know, venous insufficiency. That's something you guys in vascular will be working on, trying to help figure out venous problems for people. Then we go in and we inject some glue into them, or you strip them out surgically to get rid of them. You know, if it's a cosmetic thing. Here's a tip: if you ever have varicose veins, usually women have it more than guys. Pregnancy really puts a lot of pressure on the lower venous circulation because baby blocks the IVC. If you ever want to go to the doctor and have them fix your varicose veins, do not tell them it's because it's vanity. My wife did this. She had some varicose veins, and I told her, when you go in there, she goes, I want to get these fixed. And I said, okay. I said, does it hurt? She goes, not really. I said, wrong answer. I said, when you go in there, you tell them, you don't say anything about how it looks. You don't care how it looks. It hurts when you stand. Because she worked in a pharmacy, so she stood for like 15 years, and that's why she got it and had 3 kids. I said, don't talk about vanity. And they say, how do you like how your legs look? Say, oh, they're fine, but they hurt. And then the insurance will pay for it. But if you say, I don't like how they look, it's out of pocket. It's like $4 grand. And so she comes back, she goes, yeah, he's going to do the surgery. You know, I just got to schedule it, but it's going to have to be cosmetic because I don't like how they look. And I said, wrong answer. Surgery denied. She goes, what? I said, I'm not paying for that bullshit. I said, I told you don't tell him. I said, I coached you. I said, we're not paying for that. So she still has varicose veins. And I said, if you go back again, I said, do you want to review how you're going to discuss that with the doctor? She's like, no. She kind of gave up on that one. But I said, no, I'm not throwing $5 grand, $4 grand. What did I just say? It was a lot of money. It was a lot of money. I said, dang it. Anyway, enough about that. That got me distracted on these vein things. So remember that lesson. So the body has 3 layers: intima, media, and adventitia. Even the veins have a tunica. The intima is the layer that keeps the blood away from the outside of the body, and it keeps it from clotting. Remember, we had that heart attack class. So this intima needs to be intact because that's a happy layer for red blood cells and platelets. They don't get activated by that. The media is what the vessel uses to constrict, to change flow, and arteries have a lot more of that. And then the adventitia is like the external conduit, the pipe that holds the wrapping of the pipe. And that is stronger in artery because they are thicker and under higher pressure. But they all have those layers. Arteries don't have valves. Only veins that are gravity dependent have valves. There is a vessel that feeds the blood vessel. And here's a bonus for somebody. You know the name of the vessel that feeds the vessel. It's not in the book. It starts with vasa. Yeah, who is that?
Adam.
Adam, nice. That's right, the vasovasorum. That's the vessel that feeds the vessel. Enough about that. Here's an electron microscope. Veins are thin-walled. They're larger usually. They're very flabby. They're compressible. They're very distendable. Arteries typically will hold their own shape even if you lay them out on the table. Like, this reminds me of like between the layers of muscle on a pig, like pig meat, like if you ate ham for Easter, there's usually a big old artery running down between those muscles. And, you know, I don't eat that. I just throw that off the edge of the table and it never hits the floor because I have 3 dogs. They wait for scraps. And it never, I'm telling you, it never hits the floor. They're even the dogs that are not visual dogs, like my bird dog, I have this lab. He's really visual.
Hey, Darren, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm not. I don't want to be interrupted right now. I won't be interrupted. You just wait. I'm telling the story about my bird dog. You have to hear it.
No, Darren, I'm paying your your salary. And I have
No,
15
I'm
minutes
not
until
going to
my
accept
next
that.
class
I'm going to have
starts.
to, I'm going to delete your audio if you don't listen to my story. You just calm down. He catches everything. The Dalmatian drops a lot because she's not a visual dog, but she's learning because if she doesn't catch it, she doesn't eat. Now, we are running short on time. If you have to leave, you can leave. The recording will continue. If that's what you're going to say. Next, this is a circulatory system. Many systems are in series, some are in parallel. Look at this. Here's a capillary bed. Capillary beds have lots of branches, lots of cross-sectional area, which we'll get into next. Like 2 meters squared. That's a lot. That's like this big, this much area for blood flow. If you added all the diameters of the capillaries, the aorta, the same amount of flow goes through the aorta, and it's this big. That big, 2.5 centimeters. So how does what happens to blood flow when you take it from the aorta all the way out to the capillaries? This is a precapillary sphincter. We'll get into that in another section. That just regulates flow so it can go not through the capillaries if your body doesn't want to do that. Like if you have hand in cold water and your body doesn't want to lose temperature, it won't let the blood go through the capillaries of your hand so you don't lose heat. But that's kind of in a different chapter. This is the continuity equation, and this shows us about blood flow in cross-sectional areas. We were just talking about that with the capillaries. So if you have a flow, which is Q of 10 mils per second going through a pipe and it changes diameter, that same flow keeps going through the pipe. Here's a pipe with 3 different diameters. What happens to the velocity? V, velocity times area, are a constant with Q. So if I have 10 mils per second going through the whole system and the area was 2 times 5 is 10. If the area becomes 10, then the velocity slows down to 1. But if the area gets cut down to 1, the velocity goes up to 10. So these relationships are constant. And this kind of explains why blood accelerates through narrowings. We can measure that with a Doppler. And this is a graph that shows us the cross-sectional area, of blood vessels as we go from the aorta. Here's like the aorta out to the capillaries, very high cross-sectional area, and then back to the veins. The velocity will drop really slow if I'm going through a wide cross-sectional area, just like we learned right here. And then the velocity accelerates back up as we get back into the veins, but never achieves the same velocity as the aorta. Now, pressures and volumes of the blood system. So we were just looking at that. And here's another way of looking at it. The blood pressure in the aorta is high. The pressure drops as we go into the capillaries, but it never comes back in the veins. It never really gets up. Maybe, the right atrial pressure is 5. Now, the velocity will pick up, but the pressure doesn't. Where does the blood volume reside? This is about capacity and where the blood lives. About 20% of the blood is in your arteries, small amounts in the capillaries, and a lot of the blood's in your vein. And if I look back at this picture, you can kind of see that there's a lot of volume there. That's a place for blood to reside. So the veins are becoming like reservoirs for your blood. They're reservoirs, okay? So that when you start exercising, the blood gets shifted from your veins over to your artery. We'll learn about that in another unit. But the veins are like a reservoir. It's a holding pond for blood. So this is a graph that comes, I think you have one like this in your book, shows the velocity in the arteries, capillaries, and veins. Velocity is fast in the aorta, slow in the capillaries, goes faster in the veins. The blood volume is low in the arteries, high in the veins. Cross-sectional area is low in the arteries and veins, high in the capillaries. See? So then the biggest pressure drop happens right at the capillaries. We looked at that in this slide right here, pressure drop. These are the resistance vessels where the pressure drops. Now the next is a few questions for you. A little test prep. Where is the greatest and where is the smallest? So where's the greatest cross-sectional area? This is where you guys can answer me.
Capillaries.
That's correct. Capillaries. Where is the pressure drop the greatest? Yeah, the resistance vessels, which are the capillaries. Yes. Where's the resistance the greatest? Kind of the same. Yeah, same. Velocity. Where's the velocity the greatest? Over here at the aorta. Yeah. I could ask where's it the smallest, but I'm going to stay with greatest. Where's the volume the greatest? That's kind of a tricky question, but let's go back to this one here.
The veins.
Yeah, that's the right answer. Yeah, that's the right. The veins, because that's where the volume resides. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Okay, then where's the flow the greatest? Where's the cardiac output flow? Like it's 5 liters a minute here, 5 liters a minute here, 5 liters a minute here. That's the tricky. Volume wasn't the Q is the tricky question. As a group of vessels, the flow is equal in all of them. So the flow through the aorta is 5 liters a minute. The flow through all the capillaries together is 5 liters a minute. And the flow through all your veins together is 5 liters a minute, let's say. If it was 5 liters a minute was your output. So that's kind of not really a good question for that. Now, potential to kinetic energy. Potential is like a ball when you swing those things back and forth, or you put water up in a water tower. It's up high in gravity. As we release it, gravity pushes the water and it comes out your faucet. The ball swings up. It has potential, but no kinetic. As it starts swinging, it has more kinetic and less potential. So energy can be changed from potential to kinetic, and I think you might have learned about that in physics, so I'm not going to spend too much time with that. And we take the blood, we want it to be potential energy to perfuse coronary arteries and any artery and capillaries. And when the blood gets turned into blood flow turns into kinetic energy, it's not very useful for our body. High velocity jets don't perfuse capillaries. It's the pressure that pushes through capillaries and makes oxygen exchange across a cellular level. So high velocity jets lead to pressure gradients, and that's not what we want. This, don't worry about memorizing this formula for me. You've already done it in physics, but this is basically this is having to do with mass and velocity, turning potential to kinetic. I'll let that be addressed in your physics class. This is a formula a simplified formula that we use in echo to estimate what a valve gradient would be based on the velocity of flow, for example, through the aorta. Normally the flow, do you guys in echo know what the velocity of flow is through the aorta in a normal? Are you still with me, or did it sound like one of you was telling me they had to leave, or they were paying my salary and they wanted me to hurry up? But I wouldn't be driven like that horse. I wouldn't be whipped like that. I wouldn't allow it. I rejected that offer. I rejected that suggestion. And I'll do it again. But I did go a little long today. I am going to go long. That's not cool. That's not a good thing, but it's happening. So echo here? No? Did you guys have to go to do another class? Well, I'm sorry you had to leave. I'll finish on time next time. But, so for echo, guys, the answer is the velocity in the aorta is 1. So what's a normal pressure drop from LV to AO? Maybe I told you guys if there's a gradient more than 10, we should start getting involved with it. 1 squared is 1 times 4 is 4. So if I lost 4 millimeters of mercury across the aorta from LV to aorta, I wouldn't really care. Wouldn't be that worried about it. But when you start getting high velocity jets like with AS, like this, high velocity jets, let's say your velocity was 4. Okay, that's high. That's pretty high. 4 squared is 16. 16 times 4 is like, it's like 60 something. That's a pretty good gradient. An LV to AO gradient of 60. That's probably going to be a tight valve. So when the velocity gets up to like 2, that's not good. 3 is bad. 4 is really bad. We need to change that valve when it gets up to 4. But they can kind of estimate what our gradient would be just by this little formula. They can Doppler measure. There we go. I had a picture of a Doppler up there. They Doppler measure the velocity, and then they do 4v squared and estimate what the gradient would be, although they never did measure pressure. So they use these laws of physics to make assumptions, but then they're pretty close. Okay, Pusillier's law applies in steady state, non-pulsatile flow, laminar, large vessels in a Newtonian fluid, which is to say blood is not Newtonian because it has large and small cells. But in larger vessels greater than 0.6 millimeters, they behave Newtonian. They become non-Newtonian when they get into the capillaries. Did you guys learn about that before, Newtonian and non-Newtonian? Okay. There's the formula. I kind of already went over that when I introduced this class, so I'm not going to get into that too much. This is the big dog right here. Vascular flow and Ohm's law, Poiseuille's law basically says what are the variables of flow through the vessel. Pressure, if you double the pressure, you double the flow. If you double the radius, then 2 to the 4th power is 16. So if you double the radius of a vessel, you get 16 times more flow. That's how your body regulates flow. Viscosity gets thicker when you have like higher hematocrit. If you live in Denver, your body makes more red blood cells, and you have thicker blood, it's harder to pump it. If you have anemia, really thin blood, it's easier to pump it. It's like squeezing warm versus room temperature syrup. Like, have you ever gone to a restaurant where they give you a little cup of warm maple syrup, and then you pour it, and you put like half the cup on your, because you're not used to it coming out that fast? There you go. I did that once. Wow, and I don't like that much syrup on my pancakes. Okay. So this is now moving to a different thing called Ohm's law, which you learned about in physics with electricity, and it has to do with resistance to flow. And here I'll put an application to the body. If you have arteries that are one after another, the resistance adds up, it summates. So like the resistance from one to the next would summate. So if this was 4 and this was 2, the total resistance would be 6. If the resistance is in parallel, it makes it a lot easier for flow to go through. So if you add, like when you put a road and you put like bypass roads and build extra roads to get to the same place, more traffic can get there. So parallel really drops resistance a lot. If you're in a road and you got to go through traffic jam and then you get going again, you got to go through another, you have a lot of resistance to get somewhere. But if you have multiple roads to go to the same direction, you got a lot less resistance and you can get through. So what it works out is the effective resistance, the reciprocal of it, is equal to the reciprocal of the sum of all the parallel pathways. Okay? So if I said, well, one of them was 3 and one was 2 on these resistances, then the common denominator between 3 and 2 is 12, so I make it like that mathematically. I add those up, and that's 5/12. So that's the resistance, the effective resistance in reciprocal. So total, the real resistance is 12 over 5, which is like 2.4. There it is. Oh, there it is, right there. So there's less resistance when you do it in reciprocal, when you do it parallel. So your body does, like, that's part of how like flow can go through the capillaries. So like a lot of pathways. Flow that's laminar looks like this. These are the velocity vectors. Energy is lost as we have friction on the wall. That's why the velocity is slower. The average velocity down the center is twice the average of all flow. This is a parabolic flow pattern that happens on Earth with our gravity, with flow. If you go into space when there's no gravity, those laws change. But that we won't get into that side discussion, but on Earth, where we are, this is what happens to flow with fluid. And that can be oil in a pipeline. It could be honey coming out of the honey bottle as you're putting it on your toast. It could be blood or water going in the river. Like I can look out and see the Spokane River here. It's pretty laminar here. It's quiet and there's no white water. But if we get too much changes in velocity, we get high velocities from the loss of elevation and the water speeds up, it can become turbulent. And then you hear it, it's a murmur in the heart, and it's a bruit in the vessel. So if the doctor hears a listening and he hears a murmur in your carotid, that's a bruit. If he listens to your heart or she, then that's a murmur. Same things, it's the sound of blood flow. It's usually abnormal. And when smoke comes off a cigarette, it starts laminar and it breaks up and it spins out, and that's turbulence. When flow goes through your vessels, if it goes around a corner, it could break up and become turbulent. If there's side branches, that could break up the laminar flow and make it turbulent. If there's a change in diameter of the vessel going either direction, there can be turbulent eddies. So these are the things in the vessels that make it turbulent. So if you have stenosis, if your artery gets tight, that can create turbulence. Side branches, turns, even bifurcations can make turbulence. So these are questions about turbulent flows abnormal associated with murmurs and gradients like aortic stenosis. Oh, then after I finish this section, there'll be questions. High velocity jet is turbulent tight vessels. And it shows up as a gradient and a murmur on the phonocardiogram, gradient on pressures. So if I have, this isn't questions yet. When you have turbulence, these little swirls, look at these, see these little swirls right here? Blood, when it swirls there, it's going slower and it pools, it can clot. So you can get blood clots in these little eddies. Like when you have atrial fibrillation, you have the left atrial appendage, and there's not very much flow in the left atrial appendage because the atrium's just quivering. That's where clots happen. That's where you end up, can get strokes from the left atrial appendage. From in a patient in AFib can get a stroke. And then if you have, it could be in your right heart, and then you could get pulmonary embolus coming out of your right atrial appendage, get into your lungs. Or you can have clots come from the veins in your legs, get into your right heart, and that gives you a pulmonary embolus. But strokes come from the left atrial appendage with AFib. That's thrombotic strokes. There's hemorrhagic strokes where you have an aneurysm that bursts, and there's thrombotic strokes where clots happen. Clots come from the left atrial appendage primarily. That's the main source, there's a word called nitus, N-I-T-U-S. The nitus of a clot for cerebral clot is often left atrial appendage in AFib. Okay. Clots. So there they are. Clots can happen around anywhere the blood flow is slow. And that's what I was just talking about, pulmonary embolus. And plaque buildup, turbulent flow happens around plaque buildup because there's a change in the smooth outline of the vessel and narrowing and then increased velocity. And that can cause post-stenotic dilatation from all that energy. And in inefficient cardiac work. Oh, here's some questions. So this is like, is it turbulent or laminar? If I have plaque buildup in the vessel, it's turbulent. Post-stenotic dilatation, would that be turbulent or laminar flow? Yes, turbulent, because it changed diameters. Decreased cardiac work, hypertrophy. That's a strange one. I don't know what that is. These are so turbulence associated with these. Now that's reduced cardiac work, false. Clots, true. Bruise, murmurs, that should be turbulent. So yes, true. Okay, normal flow shouldn't have clots. That's how those are supposed to go. This is getting to the end. This is the last concept, and I'm only 3 minutes late. So shoot. Viscosity and shear thinning. This is about some strange things that happen in your blood when your blood behaves in a non-Newtonian fashion. So all these laws of physics that we were applying to the blood vessels and how Echo uses that 4V squared to estimate gradients, that's all applying in large vessels in Newtonian format. This is when the blood gets into tiny little vessels and starts behaving different. You don't really have to worry too much about this in your clinical practice, but for physiology class, we'll talk about it for a minute. I think the guys that work on blood, like, what are the doctors that work for hematologists? They would be paying attention to this because some patients have something that's called sickle cell anemia, where the red blood cells are not formed right, they're not very elastic, and they can't move through the capillaries and get blocked up. Sickle cell anemia is something that happens when your red blood cells don't have the elasticity they need. I'm going to show you something from this graph. I'm going to put this up. and put this up on the screen. Document camera. There we go. So one thing that happens when the blood cells try to get through your capillaries, their diameter is larger than the capillary. That's weird. So they have to squeeze down. Here we go. They have to squeeze down to get through the capillaries. So what makes them elastic is this. Oh, I put this is the fibrinogen. You need fibrinogen in your blood to make your erythrocytes, which are the red blood cells, be elastic. And it's directly related. Look at that relationship. That's a curve on a math graph of 1. More fibrinogen, more flexible erythrocytes. Now, we want our erythrocytes to be, and I'm going to switch back to the computer. We want our red blood cells to be flexible so they can bend and get through those skinny pipes. If you have sickle cell anemia, they don't bend right, and you get block-ups and muscle pain and clamping, claudication, which is pain when you walk, and all kinds of problems for flow. And the sickle cell is a bad disease. Okay, so this is a picture about region 1 elasticity and viscosity. This graph doesn't show it very good. I don't like it, so I'm going to pull one up out of your book. I'm going to switch over to the book for a second. I'm going to talk about this thing called shear thinning. And this shows it better. Now, do you guys have a graph like this in your book? It takes a moment. Oh, come on now. Document camera. No signal. Well, that's not cool. You see. That's working. Document camera. What is going on? Wiggle the connections. It just worked. All right, I'm going to draw it on the board. Now, let's see, what camera view do you guys have? And if I draw on the board, can you guys see me? Let me see what my view of my cameras are. Camera control, presets.
Darren, we can see the.
You can see the board? Okay, so there's this thing. Okay, so it's going to be like this. I'm drawing that. Artery and a vein, and then viscosity, relative viscosity, and then this is, oh no, that's vessel diameter. Vessel diameter. Do you guys find one like that? It looks like this. All right, well, this is viscosity, relative. I won't spend a lot of time on this, viscosity. So as the artery, this is the aorta, and this is getting down to the capillaries right here. And this is the veins. As the blood gets into tinier and tiny vessels, its relative viscosity drops. And why is that? It's because, I'll go back to my computer now, because I can't get my document camera to work. Because the red blood cells speed up when they go through the capillaries, which is a weird thing. And it makes it, the viscosity changes in tiny, tiny vessels. It actually drops. It kind of helps the blood get through the capillaries. The elasticity of the red blood cells bending to squeeze through the capillaries, they kind of get shot through there like a pump, like a watermelon seed. When you pinch it, they get squeezed through there. So it's a weird thing. It's not something that we deal with in our cardiology with catheters and balloons and echo. You're never measuring the capillary flow. You're dealing in greater vessels. But this is something that happens physiologically way down at the tiny levels. So it's called relative viscosity and shear thinning. It has to do with the elasticity and the viscosity actually drops when you get to the tiny, tiny vessels. Okay, enough about that. Go ahead.
Will we be using the 4B squared to find gradients?
I don't know. I haven't even written the test. But
Like in general,
we will not. Clinically, echo, cath guys, we will not be using it. Echo guys use it every day when they get a stenosis to estimate what the gradient would be. So let's say we had a 4-meter jet in the aorta. We estimate the gradient to be 64 millimeters of mercury, or whatever the 4b squared on 16 times 4 is, which we never did come up with. But I think it's about what was it? 64. 64.
Where we normally just be.
We would say we have a 64 millimeter gradient, and we need to put in a transcatheter aortic valve in that. Echo is going to be using that 4b squared.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I want to go too heavy into the math. I'm going to go more into concepts when I make this test, concept stuff, not so much math. You did your math in physics class. I figured that he mathed you out, and I don't need to.
5 years.
Yeah, what's that?
For the next 5 years.
You got enough math, and I think Rachel taught physics for the Echo guys. So I guess I will say I won't put math, but I do want you to know the relationships like Pustilli's law, radius to the fourth. So that kind of is math, but I want you to understand that kind of stuff. Okay, so here's the sickle cell. It's more common in African Americans or Black people, and this is a genetic disease. Does anybody know anybody that had sickle cell anemia or want to talk about how it affected their life? And it's really debilitating. Okay. But it causes a plugging up of the capillaries. It's painful, and it's a debilitating disease. And it's because their red blood cells are not flexible. Polycythemia is a term that we use when you have high concentration of red blood cells in your plasma. So have you guys ever had a blood test called hematocrit? You probably did it in A&P, hematocrit, HCT. Hematocrit. It's where you have a little capillary tube and you spin the blood down, and then you have all the red blood cells packed in here. When you're done spinning it in a centrifuge, and it might be 45% of your, and this is all clear yellow plasma. You're spinning your blood down. You guys all did that in A&P? Well, I did. Well, that's how they do it. They spin it down. They put it in, spin it down, and then we actually measure 45% of your blood volume is about normal for red blood cells. And if you have like 65%, then you have polycythemia. And you're also really good at running long races because you can like really carry a lot of oxygen. The blood's a little harder to pump because it's thicker, but you can carry a lot of oxygen. So that's like the guy in Denver comes in races in Seattle. He's a good long distance runner. Seattle guy tries to race in Denver. He can't handle it because he's out of breath. Because he's short. He has hypoxia. He has low oxygen. Now, if you have anemia, if you're bleeding and you have like a gut bleed, like you have an ulcer in your stomach and you're bleeding all the time, they can check your feces. They call it an occult stool test. They check for blood in your feces that you can't see. It's not like red, but it's just there. That could be a source of blood loss. If you have red blood if your feces is red, you're losing a lot. But usually blood that comes to the feces is black. It's old, it's been digested, it's black, and it's really stinky. It's like some really stinky feces. I've been around with like GI bleeds, and when they have like a little diarrhea or they have a little accident, man, it is harsh. It's like worse than anything. Worse than a cat's fart. Cat farts are bad. Man, what's the stinkiest thing you can think of? Cat fart is up there. Now, I've smelled tissue that's like gangrene, and that's really bad too. Dead tissue, gangrene that's fallen off. But this is black. That's really bad. Like GI bleed, poop, the black blood is really stinky. But that's off the subject. But that is related to what we would do. If somebody has a bleed, we have to be careful because we do heart caths, we put a stent in them, we give them blood thinners. Now their GI bleeds in a bad shape. So cardiology, that's relative to us. We want to, if somebody has a bleed, and one way you can find out is what is their anemia, if they're anemic. So if you did the spin down and they were at 35 hematocrit, that's the red blood cells, and the rest is plasma, they're anemic. And then so they can't carry as much oxygen. But why are they anemic? And if it's anemic because of a bleed, we better watch out if we're going to give them some heparin. So that's relative to our business. Make sense? Okay. When you get to the interventional radiology, you might be going into the gut to do some like coiling of vessels that are bleeding, like in the esophagus or in the gut, to stop the bleed, stop the loss of blood, instead of surgery, to where they would go and cut out that section or tie off those vessels. We can actually coil if we have a vessel that's leaking. If it's like an eroded esophagus, we can't just fix all that. But those things sometimes we get involved with. in interventional radiology. Okay, enough about that. If you have high velocity jet, it can cause this, it can have friction, and that can tear. That's called shear stress. Shear stress. And shear stress can tear the endothelium. And if it does, now you have a dissection. And under that dissection is a flap, and there's extravascular collagen exposed, and clots can form. But this flap can unravel. And even here's a picture where blood starts finding a false channel and starts burrowing its way. So if you get a tear in your aorta, it can start, the blood gets in there and gets pressurized, and this flap can close over, and now you have a false channel in your aorta, and that's lethal. Because all the blood's going in this false channel. It's not going to be going down into all the branches that you need. People that can have like an ascending aortic dissection, they lose all the blood pressure in the arm. They have a massive stroke because they lost all the flow down one side of one of these vessel carotids got shut off, and the flap peeled open past it. So this is a catastrophic destruction of your great vessels. It's very, very lethal dissections. There's mild ones and severe ones, antegrade ones that are worse because if they're going with the flow. Retrograde dissections are going the other way, so the flow doesn't want to open them and doesn't want to burrow into them. We could talk for an hour on dissections, but we don't have time. One way we can fix a dissection is surgically. They cut it out, put in a conduit, fix it. But that's a big surgery. I had a conduit in my office that is what they use, but I don't have it here. We can give them meds to lower their blood pressure, reduce the risk of making the dissection worse, or we can go in, here's the surgical replacement of a conduit, or we can go in with something that's called an endograft. And this is something we do in the cath lab or the interventional radiology theater. We go in and we do these in hybrid rooms that are operating rooms that have an x-ray system for cath lab. So if we have a catastrophic failure, the surgeon can come in and the room is now an operating room. We can open them up and repair. So we call these hybrid rooms. Have I ever used that term with you guys yet? Hybrid? Hybrid meaning it's like cars, it's part gas, part electric. Surgical and a cath lab. Usually they like to clean rooms down with like a lot of water, like hose it all down in surgery. Cath labs have a lot of electronics, so that's not good, hosing it down. So there's a hybrid, it's kind of a little bit of each. We put a stent that encompasses proximal and distal to your aneurysm. And this stent has a sleeve built into it. So it's not just a cage with an open network, it's a cage with a mylar sleeve around it. And so that is an exclusionary stent, meaning that when I put this stent firmly against the aorta here and here, the blood has to go through the center and no longer can it pass out and put pressure on the walls of the aneurysm. Okay, this is like for an aortic dissection or for an aortic aneurysm. We usually use them for aneurysms, but they could also tamp down a dissection. But aneurysms is where we use them electively, like a planned repair of an aortic aneurysm. So this basically makes a new conduit. Now there's no more pressure here. What do you think happens to the blood that's trapped outside the stent? Because some of the blood's trapped out in that aortic aneurysm pocket. What do you think happens to it?
Does the lymphatic system take care of it?
Well, with the macrophages, you maybe want to clean it, but it clots up. Yeah, guys, it's going to clot up. It's going to clot up, and then it basically seals up. And then it's going to scar up, which is what we want. But the pressure on the walls of this aorta are no longer there because all the pressure is going on the side of the stent. So there's no more pushing to make the aneurysm grow. So it stops that risk of that aneurysm stretching out and rupturing. My mother's husband had this done down at Kaiser Permanente in Portland 6 months ago. And I've been trying to talk him into getting it done for 2 years. And when your aorta, it gets about 6 centimeters, that's when they blow up. And he kept putting it off, and his got to like 5.8. I said, Bob, it's going to blow, and you're going to die. And then I said, and he was like, I don't want the surgery. It kind of scares me. I said, then you know what I finally got him, how I got him to do it? I said, my mom was in the kitchen getting some stuff, and I said, look at her. This is her second husband. He's not my father. I said, Bob, look at my mom. Look at her. He goes, yeah? What's that?
the way you said that.
Oh,
This is her second husband, he's not my father.
but I still care about him because I care about her.
That's funny.
Oh, all right. So at any rate, I said, look at her. And he goes, what? I said, what is she going to do without you? I said, you know, they're 80 years old. I said, what's she going to do without you? Is she going to be able to take care of this big house and this yard? I said, she's going to be devastated when you die. It's going to be really hard on her. And you are going to die. It's going to blow one day. I said, but Bob, there's a good side to it. He's all like, what? I said, it won't hurt very long. I said, you're just going to fade to black and it'll be over. And then I stopped talking because I knew that was the last thing he needed to hear. And then I walked away and went in and talked to my mom. And about 2 weeks later, Mom says, oh, Bob decided to get his surgery. So that's what it took. But he's 5.8. When he first started telling me, it was like 4. He was at 4. I said, 4? You know, you got to keep, you start looking at your options. Because 3 is normal, 2 to 3 is normal. He's 5.8. I said, Bob, it's going to blow. It's going to blow and you're just going to fade to black.
Does that stent just stay in there even after the?
Yeah, good question. It stays there for the rest of your life. Your body endothelializes it in about 3 to 6 months. It puts a new layer of endothelium and grows it, like encapsulates it. It seals it in there. The things that can go wrong is if we don't put the stent against the wall hard enough, then blood can sneak behind it and repressurize the sac. That's not good.
So when you're putting it in there, how do you know when it's?
We measure it with the CT, and so we know the actual real diameter of the vessel, and so we put a balloon that's just a little bit bigger than that and stretch it, pack it in there.
Is that what the radiologist is doing in the cath lab with us?
Yes, and we can also take an echo or vascular ultrasound and look at see if there's any flow in here. Is there any movement of blood in here? If there is, that's not a good seal. Now, one other thing that if we don't seal it here and here, blood can sneak along the side, but sometimes your body it builds collaterals. Because off of here these are thoracic arteries that feed in between your ribs, the intercostal arteries. And so sometimes they're like, hey, I'm ischemic, and the body builds collaterals and it backfills it. So it makes its own back channel to repressurize, trying to feed those intercostal arteries, but then they also backfeed that because they came off of here to the ribs, and then they backfeed and they repressurize that aneurysm, it can blow. Now, if it blows, there's not a lot of flow that's going to come out, but it's still not good. So if we have a repressurized sac, and the vascular guys are the ones that tell us that, then we go in and we put a coil in those little intercostal arteries and we seal them. The ones that's collateralizing it, maybe it's one of these little guys that's feeding back into here. So we go and block it off so it can't repressurize. That's an endograft. Endograft, we do it. If there's a leak, it's called an endo leak, or they could be repressurized by collateral, and we go in and we coil it. It's kind of cool. So I think that's about the end of the slides. These are just a summary of everything. Thanks for being patient, staying with me. For the invasive guys, and I'm sorry you echo and vascular guys had to leave for another class, but we'll be done at 9:30 from here on out. Anything else? Okay, I'm gonna hang up. So you guys in Tacoma, you guys feeling good? You happy?
Yes, we are. Thank you. Thank you.
I am looking back because the camera that I see you on is behind me. Yeah, so you guys got your scrubs on and you got you're all like looking official.
Yeah, we got.
We're over here in our blue jeans and our flannel shirts. We're not looking. You guys are looking good over there.
We got to go watch a procedures this morning. So.
A what procedure?
A couple of us we saw right heart cath, and then
We saw TAVR.
somebody saw TAVRs, and then what'd you see, Raph?
AFib ablation.
AFib ablation.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, that's the big advantage you guys have being in the hospital there. You know, maybe the disadvantage is you got to watch everything over video, but the big advantage is you're right in the house.
Hey, Darren, I got a question.
Sure.
I have a question. So when you talk about the stenting staying there for the whole duration, what's the case then where they have to switch them out? Because I read in the book that that one of the cons for having a stent opposed to the graft is the stents will have to get changed out eventually.
Maybe I don't know. They're in there for life. I mean, was it a pediatric case? Was it a baby? Because
No, I
babies
don't know.
grow and stents.
I was reading
Was
the pros
it
and
a
cons.
recall? Was it a recall? Was it like a product failure? I don't know. I don't have an answer for you.
Okay, I'll look it up and see then, because I googled it and the pros and cons to graft and stenting. So I'll double check that then. Maybe I just misread it, but I thought that stenting was like you have to switch it out. That was one of the cons, and graft is more long term. But maybe it's the opposite, the other way around.
Well, then, yeah, follow up on what you. I can't answer your question, but maybe follow up and let us know.
I will do. I was gonna do.
Okay, one more thing. So these guys are already going to the hospital. I'm gonna try to get you all, the Spokane guys, into the hospital this quarter. So I'm gonna make another push with, you gotta make sure that your health documents are up to date, your TB and all that. We're gonna make a push with Tracy Baker. She works here, and I'm gonna have you guys get like signed up on this, like whatever they need to let you get in the hospital, she's gonna help you get that going. So later in this quarter, I wanna get you guys on a tour to either Sacred Heart or Deke. We'll split you into two. And wherever you go with this tour is where you might go for the summer. You will go for the summer if you're staying in town. And if you're going somewhere else this summer, coming back in the fall, that's where you would go. So I'm gonna put you where you're gonna go, get the paperwork going so you'll be set for clinicals. Question?
Valley Hospital just opened a cath lab.
They have one, they're slow. When we send you to Deaconess, they can rotate you to Valley. And it's the same contract, same paperwork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if you knew, because I just found out that they just opened it. I found out a couple weeks ago.
Well, they've had it for years. And one of the gals that is the manager there is one of our adjunct faculty, so yeah. Yeah, maybe you just heard about it.
Yeah.
Maybe they just opened a new one, but they've had, no, it's been there 10 years. They do mostly interventional radiology.
Yeah.
Holy Family has a cath lab. I don't send you guys up there because it's too slow. Sacred Heart and Deke, and sometimes Kootenai. If somebody lives out in the valley, but nobody's told me that they wanted to go to Kootenai, maybe I think Gina wanted to go.
Gina's a Kootenai.
Yeah. So if you live out in the valley, or if she lives in Post Falls, then I'll try to send you to Coeur d'Alene so you don't have to drive so far. But we'll get into that in our afternoon class. We'll talk more about cath stuff. So I'm going to sign off. I'm going to hang up, and I'll talk to you guys at 12:30 over at Tacoma.
Sounds good, Mr. Powell.
Okay.
Thank you.
Darren?
Thanks, Darren.